Welcome to the Reality Revolution. I am your host, Brian Scott. Today we have a really interesting episode with some very recent channelings from Quo that seem to be related to what's going on in the world and the wars that we're fighting. There's a very interesting conundrum that you get from the law of one material, and that is you can end up polarizing negative if you're bellicose in any way, meaning you're fighting the darkness, and in the process of fighting the darkness, you become the darkness. They use the word bellicosity. One may polarize negatively by assuming bellicose attitudes for whatever reason in Raw 34:14. And so that means that if you're fighting the darkness or fighting evil, you can actually end up polarizing negatively just because you're quarreling with the darkness. At the same time, it's indicated that there is a sort of thought battle going on in fourth density and beyond between the service to self and service to others groups in the law of one material. If a lot of that doesn't make sense, just go back to some previous episodes. Just to give you some basics, Quo is a principle or collection of higher density entities that channel through a group called LL Research. And they deal with spiritual questions, and in particular, they elucidate and elaborate on the law of one. The law of one was established in the Raw material, which was channeled by a group called Raw, a social memory complex. And Quo is a combination of social memory complexes, including Raw. So it's very interesting. They're asking questions in light of what's going on now. For instance, hey, you want to go fight those terrible people over there, but you end up turning negative when you go and fight. Is there a way for us to fight the evil without actually turning to the darkness? This also covers a variety of other topics that are super interesting, including a further discussion of calling upon the angels and their directions, as well as some questions about chakras. So we begin on a channeling on March 2nd, 2022. The question was, in light of recent events, today we would like to explore the Confederation's perspective on the relationship between bellicosity and polarity, especially with respect to the following statement from Ra. In 34:14, one may polarize negatively by assuming bellicose attitudes for whatever reason. Quo begins, I am Quo. We greet this circle in the love and in the light of the one infinite creator. As we join this circle in this meeting, we find a certain vulnerability or tenderness present in the hearts of those instruments gathered. We sense that there may be some hesitation or questioning about the influence of this tenderness on the practice of channeling as you wish to perform this day. We encourage the circle to consider how these influences that create vulnerability and tenderness come from the heart and are a result of an attempt by those mind-body-spirit complexes present to relate to difficult situations within your world from an open heart. To acknowledge the source of this tenderness and to work within the heart to find a more crystallized, loving relationship with the self and with the world about one will ultimately empower this contact that we have with you, for it will further open the heart, further provide an open flow of love and light, and create a stronger anchor or connection between this circle and those of the Confederation in service to the one infinite creator, so that our shared service may be performed with greater and deeper meaning. The question you pose on this day inspires us to reiterate even stronger than usual our typical request that any who may hear or become aware of our words upon their path of seeking use their personal discernment and weigh whatever thoughts we share against their own hearts and their own sensibilities, so that we do not become an undue influence upon your path. This request is important at this time because of the situation that the instruments within the circle are aware of, and that the question refers to in your global geopolitical situation. Side note, if you're listening to this In another time frame, this is being channeled right at the beginning of the conflict between Ukraine and Russia. Quote goes on to say, this is a difficult topic for us to speak to in a clear sense because the attitudes of bellicosity as they present themselves and manifest upon your planet are quite unfamiliar to us. Bellicosity has been a, shall we say, hallmark of third density for many members of the Confederation, yet the level of technology and violence and destruction capable through the manifestation of bellicosity on your planet and other planets within your solar system in what you would call the past are much greater than we have personally experienced. Side note, bellicosity is defined as an inclination to fight or quarrel. Quote continues, and as you know, we of the Confederation have in the past made certain miscalculations or missteps in interacting with your planet, engaging the effect of our influence upon your planet. And so our request that our words be taken not as instruction but as perspective are far more important on this topic. You ask about the polarizing effect of the attitude of bellicosity, and we would point out that the nature of this passage quoted within your query refers to the polarizing effect of a moment, of a certain reaction that can be taken in response to the situation referred to within your query. An entity can respond to aggression by taking an attitude of bellicosity, that attitude being the desire for war, the desire for revenge, the desire for returned destruction, returned pain, to pay back, as you might say, that which was given. Indeed, this attitude, in a moment, may polarize one towards the negative path. Yet we emphasize that as we communicate this, it is not a moral judgment, but only a description of the metaphysical dynamics at play. For we find, as we interact with your planet and gain the perspective of the instruments within this circle, that such a reaction is quite common and understandable and seen by many as even necessary for the preservation of life. We, from our perspective, may be boggled by this perspective, yet we offer you and any who take that perspective our own love and understanding, and encourage those who question these attitudes as you have in your query today. Take note that polarity, as described by us, is a long journey through many lifetimes. Any action taken in a single moment, any reaction to aggression or even kindness, does not indicate the polarity of an entity in its totality. We find it within the realm of possibility that even an entity well upon the positive path on your planet may find itself reacting to life-threatening aggression with attitudes of bellicosity. The more long-term implications upon the polarity of the entity may be found more in how the entity then relates to that reaction when time has come to reconcile it within the self. For those upon the negative path, by engaging with this bellicosity and discovering this deep passion within them to return warlike attitudes, one may find an awakened sense of life and passion. To pursue this further would then take that entity further along the negative path, realizing that this attitude can be used to increase one's own power and to control those about one. For an entity wishing to seek upon the positive path, one may look upon the reaction of bellicosity and use it to examine the self in the light of acceptance and love for both self and other self. This may be done by asking questions of the self. What attitudes did I take because I was in fear, because I was threatened? Did certain situations cause my heart to close? And if so, what can I learn about my own heart? This circle reflected earlier upon the cultural differences that perhaps are energized, encouraging one to relate more to those who share a similar culture and thus feel a stronger sense of obligation to protect, as opposed to those who look differently and who exist within a different culture. These attitudes are natural upon your planet and within your species. It is important for the self wishing to serve others, not to judge the self for discovering these attitudes within the self, but it is the imperative of the positive seeker that in discovering these attitudes within the self, love is brought within the self to transform the attitudes, to find ways in which the love of the Creator may be shared in greater ways. with more of your other selves and with fewer barriers between the heart of self and the recognition of the heart of other self. We thank you. We will pause for a moment to allow this instrument to deepen its state. We are quo, and we are again with this instrument. We will take a moment to acknowledge the emotion and depth of care expressed by this circle and reflect that as we sense it, the heightened sensitivity is similarly felt by many upon your planet at this time who are aware of the situation of war and bellicosity as it has recently manifested. We also take a moment to encourage the reflection of not just those within this circle, but all those who feel similarly to examine the present moment in which the significance of this event feels so powerful, and look to those biases and distortions within the self that cause this moment and this event to conjure such a reaction. For we of the Confederation of Planets in service to the one infinite creator, taking what you may call the long view of your planet, have witnessed many situations very similar to what has transpired in your recent days. We mention this not to attempt to judge or shame any individual for feeling any particular reaction, but to encourage one to enter the heart where it has been opened, to swim in these waters of emotion and allow it to flow freely, and in doing so realize that the opportunity for this depth of feeling has been present in many ways and in many places within your lives and within the long history of your planet. That you feel these things now and not previously is not something to be discouraging or ashamed of, but rather the opposite. That there is now an opportunity to bring this emotion to bear, to allow it to fill your being and to feel it in its entirety is a blessing that you may take from your personal situation, not to make light of the suffering that has encouraged this reaction, but that the catalyst of the suffering that you view has now landed effectively, and the potential to use this catalyst to open the heart more to discover deeper understanding of the self and how the self may serve others, how one may come to relate to all other selves. This potential is now available in ways that has not been in the past. This, my friends, is how a seeker upon the positive path may reflect upon the nature of bellicosity within the self. For bellicosity necessarily requires the self to create distortions and biases in order to view other self as less important, less significant, and less the creator than the self. We again emphasize that this reaction is not unusual. It is the entire purpose of third density to cast a spell of confusion, to allow the self to even consider that another self is not the creator. And so one may say that to react to such aggression with an attitude of bellicosity is indeed an appropriate response in third density, in the sense that that is what this density was designed to conjure within the self. The overriding purpose of this design is to allow the self to make a choice within the mire of confusion. A moment such as this brings the potential for clarity. The strength of reaction allows for a potential pathway into the heart, or a potential pathway to close the heart. And in these two pathways lies the choice that the third density was designed to promote, to place before the self. We find innate within the question posed on this day another implied question of how one may relate to aggression in a positive sense without entering the attitude of bellicosity. Is it possible to protect the self and to protect other self from aggression while remaining positive? We find this question an incredibly complicated topic to address through channeling circles such as this, for it requires an incredibly intimate perception of the self and even of other self. For one to react to aggression with love in a way that still protects the self and other self requires one to know the self deeply and have shed many unconscious distortions that would fool yourself into thinking that they are acting out of love. Yet in reality, they are acting from a place of survival, of instinct. However, it is possible, my friends, if one has the bias towards protecting others, and they do so without engaging in attitudes of separation and see the aggressor as the creator, and yet do everything in their power to minimize harm in a situation, up to and including using similarly violent acts to prevent further harm, it is possible, yet a rare scenario upon your planet. We emphasize this is a quite rare occurrence, for as you may understand, this is an incredibly difficult attitude to maintain within the confusion of third density, for there are not only cultural biases but biological biases within the self that promote an instinct of survival, of protecting the pack, the tribe. And so, we find it is much more common that any act taken in reaction to aggression to protect the self and other self likely must be reconciled at some point within the self as an act that separates, and thus a positive entity must reflect upon their reaction in order to reconcile and bring love and forgiveness, and if it is found necessary, restitution to one's actions. This is how one may engage with the attitude of bellicosity, with the protection of self and other self while upon the positive path. We look upon your planet and we look within your hearts and we feel both great sorrow and great compassion. Your present moment presents a great opportunity for you as conscious seekers to awaken even more to the path of love. We encourage each to, in any moment that they are reflecting upon the situation, that they feel moved and energized in any way, to pause and consider where love is within that moment. The depth of emotion and even concern felt likely comes from the heart, but is veiled in confusion. And so the opportunity then is to unveil that love, to make it more clear and allow it to shine even brighter upon a world that calls for it deeply and desperately, as the transformation of your planet from third density to fourth density grows closer, and the seeming chaos and disharmony create more opportunities for each individual to recognize the truth of fourth density, that of love and understanding, so that it may be born in full upon your planet. We are available to any seeker wishing to find some stability in their meditations. We may offer our love and our light to all who request it. Yet the request is important, and we encourage each who desires to work with our love and light to consciously open themselves and call, for we will respond, and we are honored to do so. We moved to a channeling on March 9th, 2022, 1 week later, and they do discuss many of these same topics here. I am Quo, and am with this instrument. We greet each in love and light, and we thank you for your invitation to join your circle of seeking this evening. We are most honored, as always, to be with you, for you are our spiritual companions on this long journey of seeking and serving the One in all things. It is our great honor to ask if there might be a query with which we may begin this evening's channeling session. Gary says, yes, Quo, there is, and it might be short enough that this instrument might also take a small follow-up to this one. Up to you and this instrument. This question comes from D, who asks, in the banishing ritual, the 4 cardinal directions are used in conjunction with 4 archangels. For instance, the practitioner faces east and visualizes Archangel Michael bringing the gifts and powers of fire on the right-hand side associated with the direction of self. And on the left-hand side, the practitioner visualizes Archangel Uriel bringing the gifts and powers of earth associated with the direction of north. Also, the rotation in the ritual always moves clockwise. Does the clockwise rotation along with the use of north and south need to be inverted when practicing this ritual in the southern hemisphere? Or does the intention and heart behind magical work matter more than the details? I am Quo, and I am aware of your query, my brother. Before we begin this response, we would always ask that you take the words and concepts we offer through this instrument and use them in any manner which is helpful to you. If you find any that are not helpful, please disregard them. The concepts which you speak of, the rotation of the white magician in performance of the banishing ritual of the lesser pentagram, is a rotation which is, shall we say, self-contained. The invocations that are made during the performance that ask for the various archangels to be alerted to the need for their purification and inspiration is the primary factor which any adept would utilize in the performance of this ritual. It is that which can be performed in either the north or south hemisphere, in the same fashion, without regard to any other elements or features of the geography that one performs the ritual within. The ritual moves in a clockwise direction because it is seen to be that which is outward moving to distribute the protective energies throughout the room, the house, or the area which is being purified and protected. These outward flowing energies are positive in nature. Thus, the clockwise rotation is that which is most helpful in sharing these energies with the environment about one, which after a certain period of time becomes likened unto a living entity that receives the blessing of the various archangels and the one infinite creator, as it is receiving the various invocations that are a part of this banishing ritual. This is what you would call a positive sharing of love and light of the one creator with the one creator that exists within each portion of the room or domicile that is being purified and protected. To call upon various facets of the one creator in this manner is to amplify the adept's recognition of the one creator which exists in all things. Question: do I understand correctly that north and south, as they are used in the northern hemisphere, can also be used in the southern hemisphere? Are there any magical rituals that apply to the southern hemisphere? I am Quo, and I'm aware of your query, my brother. It is our belief that this is true, that the ritual has its same application of performance in either hemisphere, because it is that which we have called a self-contained ritual that performs its magical effects in the area that is being purified and protected, rather than being considered as only effective in one or the other hemisphere. As far as other rituals that might be utilized by a person who wishes to purify or protect a place or room or location, we would suggest that one begin as the neophyte in the creation of one's own rituals, being composed of those qualities which one sees as being primary in not only the spiritual journey of one's own self, but in the spiritual journey of any positive seeker of truth. Each entity can be seen as a magician, a white magician, a positively polarized service to others being that has within it the ability to fashion a type of invocation and evocation of certain qualities and entities that may respond to the call for their assistance from the inner planes to the space-time environment of the neophyte magician. In the beginning of this type of creation of one's own magical ritual, there will be a kind of protection and purification of minor quantity and quality that will be experienced by the area or room being magically protected and purified. As time progresses and the intention increases on the part of the neophyte magician, both the neophyte magician and the rituals it creates will mature in their ability to finely tune and call for assistance from those within the outer and inner planes. And this call will be heard in a louder and louder, shall we say, ringing of the phone. So there will be a response to the calling that will increase in its efficacy and its ability to provide the purification and protection that the neophyte, which grows into the mature magician, asks to be provided. This is a process which each positively oriented seeker of the truth partakes in, whether conscious of such or not, as one pursues the spiritual journey of seeking to serve others with every thought, word, and deed. This desire is seen as a foundation stone upon which the life path is created, so that there is within each seeker of truth the ritualistic behaviors that are emitted from the mind, the body, and the spirit in a fashion which allows the desire, the intention to be of service to others, to be that which is offered as seed, shall we say, for the growth of the service to others, polarity within the seeker of truth. This is the means by which each seeker then becomes likened unto white magician, perhaps not in as great the potentiality, but yet in a reality which is most efficacious in aiding the polarization of the consciousness of service to others and to the one creator in all things. Thus, the spiritual seeker moves through the life pattern, one incarnation after another, one density after another, until there is the complete union with the one creator, which is the goal of all white magicians to seek in order to serve. Question: Ra describes that in fourth density there is a battle of light between positive and negatively oriented social memory complexes. I have a couple paragraphs to read about that and then a question. Ra says in 25:6, this being a battle of equals, the Confederation is aware that it cannot on an equal footing allow itself to be manipulated in order to remain purely positive, for then, though pure, it would not be of any consequence, having been placed by the so-called powers of darkness under the heel, as you may say. It is thus that those who deal with this thought war must be defensive rather than accepting in order to preserve their usefulness in service to others. Thusly, they cannot accept fully what the Orion Confederation wishes to give, that being enslavement. Thusly, some polarity is lost due to this friction, and both sides, if you will, must then regroup. End of quote. So I am curious about the defensive posture of the positive-oriented entities. When positive forces must resist the encroachment of negative forces, does that also imply self-righteousness or bellicosity in any way on behalf of the positive forces? What is the positively oriented entity's attitude with regard to this defensive resistance in what Ra describes as a battle? We are Quo, and we are aware of the query, my brother. We would begin addressing this interesting and complicated situation by first offering somewhat of a disclaimer in that the battle described by those of Ra in this passage is a unique dynamic that plays out within the realms and upon levels that are beyond the full grasp of the third density being. There is a certain cosmological context to what has been described as a battle of thought that cannot be applied to the veiled existence of the third density entity in a, shall we say, one-to-one fashion. Thus, we offer a response to this query in the hopes that there is some extrapolation to be made for the third density entity, but caution any who reads or hears these words that these are unique circumstances that a third density entity is unlikely to experience. We first address the notion that the Confederation as a whole, which includes entities of primarily the fourth, fifth, and sixth densities, realizes that to allow the Crusaders of the Orion Empire to carry out their self-proclaimed duty or calling to bring what they view as order and meaning to the universe, but may be seen in a positive context as enslavement and infringement upon free will. That for the Confederation to allow this dynamic to unfold would result in, from the viewpoint of the law of one and of the one creator, an imbalance and an infringement upon the energetic cycles of the creator. Thus, the Confederation of planets, in service to the one infinite creator, tapping into a certain grasp of these dynamics thanks to the guidance of what you know as the Council of Saturn, is able to move and interact in certain ways that may seem, from a certain perspective, antithetical to the overall goal of service to others and service to the Creator by participating in what is described as a battle. This task is given to those of the fourth density. For the higher densities of fifth and sixth density have a broader view of this. We correct this instrument of these mechanisms at play that allow them to see how the Creator's will may unfold in both the actions of the positive fourth density entities and the actions of the Orion Empire. Thus, these higher densities do not participate in such a battle, but do not discourage or refrain from allowing the fourth density entities to take up their own arms of thought in order to protect and serve through the act of defense, as you have called it. The primary difference between this thought battle and what you may experience in third density known as war and the concept of bellicosity is an attitude available to those of fourth density that allows these entities to see the Creator within those whom they are defending against. And thus the actions that they take are based primarily within the green ray of universal love. That love being manifested as protection against enslavement and the preservation of free will. This attitude is an incredibly difficult attitude to manifest within the third density, for the veil is intended to prevent an entity who may take up defensive attitudes from recognizing the presence of the Creator in any situation. The mechanism of survival and tribalism are primary aspects of the catalyst that you experience within the third density. And in a moment at which one's life is threatened, or one's loved ones are threatened, the Creator and thoughts of the Creator are generally outside of the reach of an individual who instead feels a swell of survival, and an act that, in the end, may be based upon love of another. In the moment is undertaken with an attitude of separation that may be manifested as anger, as fear, or even thoughts of revenge and retribution. It is not what you may say impossible for a third density entity to partake actively in defense of high ideals, such as free will and the preservation of loved ones, and maintain an attitude of unity, even in the midst of such battle, as you would say. But we reiterate that this attitude is one that is much more present within the fourth density, and when bellicosity finds itself manifest within the third density, there is much more catalyst for the third density entity to work with in terms of discovering the heart of self, and how love has been blocked, how conditions have been raised because of the illusion of separation and its strength within the third density. It is through this illusion and through the ways that it manifests in response to things like bellicosity that such circumstances, as dire and significant as they are within the third density, may hold the key to opening of the heart and of discovering a higher nature of service to others for the positive individual. We thank you for this query and offer our own thoughts of love and peace, for we find that such a question comes from what we would call a heavy heart, based upon the circumstances present upon your planet and weighing upon the minds and hearts of those present in this circle. We are with you and all who call and offer our deepest love and light and hopes for peace and comfort for all upon your planet. Question. The question is from M, who is not Austin and Kay's second density companion. At least I don't think so. It's about unblocking the yellow ray, but there are a couple paragraphs of preamble. M writes, I work in a hospital as a nurse. It's pretty obvious that I struggle most in situations dealing with groups, such as working members or strangers in general. If people accept me and show me a warm welcome, my ego ice melts extremely fast, and I'm able to be myself, but in general, I have deep fears of being denied, rejected, or criticized. This leads me to subconsciously manifested behavior of adapting to others' wishes and control mechanisms. Because of that, I often feel shame and anger for myself. I got way better at communicating and settling healthy boundaries. Nevertheless, these situations are regularly attracted into my daily round of activities, and I know these are solar plexus themes that are an energy block for my true heart. So the question, how can I activate and balance the yellow ray chakra most effectively, taking into consideration childhood trauma between 5 and 12 years old? We are those of Quo, and we understand the query. This flavor of blockage of the yellow ray energy center is one we find quite common among your people on this planet at this time. The third density experience is one in which entities struggle to find authentic means of relating to one another, while healing and moving beyond such injuries, for lack of a better word, tied to the ego as trauma, self-judgment, or what you may call societal norm. We mention this fact, this figure of being quite common to hopefully provide some room for grace for the self, that is, for the self to allow some space for the self to be gentle and kind. The environment, the stage upon which you dance, the illusion can be a very difficult one to navigate and to see clearly. Hence, it is ripe with opportunity for self and other self to engage in what you may call hurtful or destructive manners, often with one entity approaching the situation with an open heart and walking away with emotional, physical, mental, or spiritual scars. Consider those scars part of you, and that they inform your thought and your action, and they are but a component of that which you may call your identity. There are also potentially avenues for heightened experience of emotions and clear channels for exploring growth and healing, if the injured self may allow oneself to open the heart to those channels. Dear seeker, it sounds that the scars that entities carry with them can become sort of a baggage, if you will, something that is carried with the self through the moments of what you call time, that add weight to the shoulders of the seeker on the journey, or blur or narrow the vision, narrow the means by which the open heart can send and receive love. It must be noted that this baggage is neither good nor bad. There is no value judgment to this baggage, to these scars, for there is nothing random in this illusion. There is nothing good nor bad. It is all perfectly in alignment to help the Creator experience and know itself. The seeker who finds itself carrying this baggage, carrying these scars and experiencing the illusion around it through those lenses with that pain, is the seeker who is guarding itself, not just from other selves, but from its own heart. To state this more clearly, we would say that the injured self is walking through this dance closed off from itself. For at the center of all that there is, for at the beginning of all that there is but one thing, and that is love. If this self cannot, or struggles, to connect with the other selves around it due to previous incarnational experience, then it is also not fully loving the self. The purest expression of the self is that of love, is that of an open heart first and foremost to the self for the self. So my dear seeker, these difficulties in relating in group situations or to other selves, these fears of rejection and perhaps being alone, and these actions that attempt to manipulate or control are not aspects to shame yourself for. Judgment of self does not leave a clear path to love. No, instead forgiving the self, being gentle with the self, treating the self like the pure and beautiful reflection of the Creator, that is the way to experience all you wish to experience, to find that comfort, to find that peace. Be that in the self also with other selves. We hope that our words do not land as minimizing of the experiences which the seeker may call trauma. It is understood that trauma is an experience of deep pain, suffering, fear, and is difficult to move beyond. We simply suggest that the self who must walk with the trauma be gentle to the self. Your intention may be your guidepost, may be the fuel in your engine, may be your beacon on the hill as well. continually steering your way towards love, towards acceptance, towards being your full and true authentic self. And you may find as you continue walking in that direction, allowing intention and slowly allowing that love to come within your heart, you will find that the scars begin to heal. The baggage begins to feel less weighty, less heavy, and even perhaps the colors in your illusion, in your environment, become more vibrant. And as you begin to fully accept yourself for all that you are, as those in your density may say, warts and all, you begin to see the self as that perfect expression, that perfect hologram, that perfect manifestation of the Creator. You may then also begin to see the perfection that surrounds you, knowing that love created all there is, and begin to feel the walls around your heart come down. It is as you take this walk that one may begin to practice the act of vulnerability, of being authentic, of showing up in any situation exactly as you are, without pretense, without expectation, but full embodiment of the self. You may find, dear seeker, that when you strip away the armor, that protective shell around the heart, the shell which we would again reiterate is one that comes from a place of wanting to protect the self, but ultimately keeps the self from loving the self. Once that armor is dropped, then the seeker may find the ease of relating to other selves, begin to feel more within reach. And as you allow the self to freely experience that vulnerability and explore this new mental and emotional landscape, the comfort builds upon itself. Before we take our leave of this instrument, we would like to stress again the importance for the seeker who feels blocked in this way, that the first and final step, and every step in between, will always be love. As you plant your foot down in your walk forward in this time, in this illusion, in this incarnation, allow the self to fully plant each foot, each step, in genuine, beautiful, foundational love. In that way, my friend, you will only begin to strengthen that connection to the heart and soul, not just of the self, but of all creation. Question? I have a question that I haven't been able to get a clear answer on through the material. I have a severe binge eating disorder and have tried so many different things to alleviate the daily fear and control I experience from it. I've tried modern medical treatment, which ended up being more of a band-aid, and I've tried spiritual programs where the healing is promoted through emotional release and trust in my body. But I'm still unable to let go of the fear and control I have, which causes me to force my body into being a certain size by whatever means necessary. It doesn't work anyway. I continue to gain weight, but I fear that if I do not control myself at all, I'll end up dying. What is it that causes these eating disorders? What is it that needs healing? And what is the best way to go about this healing? We are those of Quo, and we understand your query, my sister. And we may echo our previous term of endearment for you as a dear seeker, for first and foremost, that is what you are. Very dear to the Creator and very much a seeker of truth and of healing. We may begin by addressing your first query. We correct this instrument the first part of your query, which asks about the causes of such a condition, such as you have been experiencing in all levels of your being. And we may say that the second and third parts of your query, which deal with healing, which once accepted and understood, revoke such cause, erase such cause, such that it becomes non-existent. So we may first ask that if it may be possible for you to look at, and any who have a situation such as yours, to look at the idea of cause with its opposite of no cause, non-existent, and see that a cause is not a permanent condition, is not something permanent in creation, and is even as illusory as any other part of the illusion in which entities have their being in this third density. Therefore, when cause can be seen in such a light, it can begin to thin out, to begin to dissolve as a first concept, and then as a part of the condition of which you speak. We may encourage you first to meditate quietly upon this idea that what you may call cause of this condition, or any condition causing pain, upset, deep distress even, can be seen as something that can be dissolved. Taking this thought into meditation and pairing it with a deep love of self, the love that transcends all pain and difficulty, begin to feel that such cause along with such condition can simply dissolve, allowing first for that to be a possibility, then allowing for that to be a process underway within your being, seeing it as a reality, replacing the other reality that you had described. This is not to diminish in any way the pain and suffering and exhaustion that you've described of your experience, but is only to, in a gentle way, offer a process of creating a new reality for the self. All creation is forever in motion, forever being created and recreated. And seeing this possibility for yourself would be a great first step to seeing that the cause and the condition itself can be recreated, reimagined, reshaped as a new condition of health and well-being. It is important to understand there is no pressure or time constraints or expectations that are necessary or needed for such a meditative, creative process. It is completely timeless and without pressure. The meditation of which we speak is done, as we said previously, through love of self in the deepest part of your being, letting that gentle but powerful love with which your very being was and is being created anew, getting into the feeling of that idea of being continually renewed and refreshed in every part of your being, physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual. All things, on all these levels of your being. Think of them as being washed over with this love of self, of all of yourself, and all the levels of your being. That, my friend, is what dissolves away in whatever time frame is right for you for this particular condition and request that you have dissolved away in the bathing of self with love and light. And with the light and the power of love behind it and underneath it, see yourself in this meditation, in whatever time is most comfortable for you, a recreation, literally, of the parts of your being that need this loving attention, this refreshment of being, which is your right as an entity of the Creator, forever loved and held in the embrace that the Creator. And so, in addressing the idea of cause and condition, we've already touched upon the idea of healing, for they are the same. The condition and its healing. All things, in whatever we correct this instrument of whatever nature, within an entity's being can be positive or detrimental. But all things within an entity's being always can be healed in any moment through the power of love, through the intelligent energy of the light of the Creator, which then comes to assist in the recreation of the body, mind, spirit formations that need refreshment of being. Again, we may say that we do not diminish pain and suffering that you have experienced or any entity has, especially when concerning a bodily condition that is related to emotional and mental conditions as well. We understand how overwhelming and difficult such situations are. And we say again that to recreate anyone's life in any way is to start at the center. Just start at the beginning. It is actually very simple. Go to the center of self. Enter into a deep meditation. Feel the love of the Creator. Feel the love of yourself. You and the Creator partake of this love of self. Feel this love radiating throughout your entire being on every level. Healing anything that needs to be healed connected with this situation that you have described. The intelligence of the love and the light will know exactly what needs to be healed. And be pure in your meditation and open-hearted that this not only can happen, but is happening right now, right within you. All entities have this power. It is the power of the one infinite Creator whose love is infinite, boundless, and gentle at the same time. We may say that healing can come in an instant once a realization of the truth of your being is held firmly in consciousness. We may also say that in other times, a consistent, persistent daily meditation over time may be what is needed to gently dissolve away the condition. In the bathing of self with love and light gently over time, refreshing and recreating one's being. Again, the intelligent light and love know how to recreate one's consciousness, must simply partake of this with the open heart and acceptance that it is. One may also seek the support and love of friends who may believe as you do in this creative power within your being and within the Creator, so that you may meditate together with a friend or more than one friend supporting your meditation of love and light. We may say all things, all conditions have their opposite, which is non-existence. All things, all conditions have a healing as a potential within them. There is never a condition that cannot be healed. And so we now extend our deep compassion to you, my friend, that you may find the peace and the strength to reach within the self knowing that the power and love of the Creator is within you, that you do have help. And we hope that our words may provide such help to you, as well as comfort and a knowing, a feeling that what you seek is possible. What you seek is already potentially within you, within your heart, within your grasp. Question. Quote, our recent peace meditations had me thinking about a common criticism that people in the more secular world have about the notion of thoughts and prayers, and their lack of effectiveness, if not accompanied by more practical acts of service. And that, of course, doesn't take into account the Confederation's view on the power of thought and the power of prayer. But I think that it can sometimes be a valid criticism. I also have read a book called The Willpower Instinct that thinking about acts of service and thinking about doing good things can activate the same portions of our brain as actually doing them and cause a demotivational effect so that we feel less compelled to actually carry out acts of service by thinking about them. I was wondering if the Confederation could comment on reconciling these notions of thoughts and prayers and visualizations and meditations versus more practical means of service, and whether or not these can be reconciled together. We are those of Quo, and we give gratitude for this question, for the third density entity who is conscious to one degree or another of its necessity and desire to polarize its consciousness. We'll be contemplating questions of how it may best be of service to others in your plane or upon your plane. For the opportunities of service in any given moment are endless, particularly in a world where suffering and trauma are so widespread and experienced by so many. Whether through natural disaster, that which you know as medical difficulty, or some other form of suffering inflicted one upon the other, the cries ring out. How does the positively polarized, we correct this instrument, positively polarizing entity respond to such need? How may it best be of service? What may be the most effective in that service? And my brother, we would say that each situation is of course unique. Each entity must search its heart to discover that which may be of the greatest service to a single other self or a group of other selves in any given predicament. The self is quite capable of operating at multiple levels and all levels in this regard of service, whether that is the interior level of thoughts and prayers or the exterior, so to speak, level of outwardly oriented action, which is more visible, perhaps more practical, and seen upon the third density level as more consequential. Both of these operations spring from the desire to be of service. We would commend any entity considering this question to examine its desire in this regard, to look within the heart and find what the true reaction is to the particular call for service reaching this entity's ears. It may be found that an entity has some level of desiring to offer service to those in need, but feels that its ability is too limited to be of much help. And it's at a minimum such that with some degree of sincere desire, it gives lip service to the thoughts and prayers, feeling itself either unavailable or unable to offer more, finding itself occupied with other concerns or modes of service. While we would not in any way judge such a response, as the polarizing positive entity does indeed wish to be of service, and would wish no other self-seeking service to be without, nonetheless, in terms of what you would call impact upon both the self-offering service and the intended recipient of said service, such casual, quickly spoken, and perhaps shallow utterances of thoughts and prayers will have little charge into their manifestation in your illusion. However, we're such an entity to bring their focus and their awareness to the situation at hand in a deeper way, particularly in that container known to you as meditation, and consciously, with concentration and the effort, not of strain, but sustained intention, can engage in that process of prayer for another self or situation, a process whereby an opportunity is enlarged such that informational and supportive and strengthening light may be with the prayer and the recipient of the prayee, the one offering the prayer. What is the consequence of this light love sent from entity A to entity B? When entity B is struggling with one aspect of your illusion or another, internally, externally, or both, that light comes, as all things do, from the One. That light seeks to cross the expanse of separation created in the illusionary perception of the individual's awareness, to bridge and provide a way toward increasing the unity within the self and within all things in an empowering way, rescuing in one sense, though not totally accurate, the self locked in the throes of their predicament and the accompanying suffering. With this increased light available to the self, to the recipient of the prayer, they may make use on a subconscious level in order to, in an empowered way, more successfully learn the lesson before them, process the catalyst into the material for spiritual evolution, and rediscover its wholeness and its capacity to love whatever the circumstance presents. With this light, the self may more effectively clear the shadows from the eyes and navigate the situation from a vantage point of clearer sight. This light may also, in a supportive, healing fashion, help to clarify the environment about one, such that guidance may more effectively flow in, such that the circumstances of synchronicity, of the intelligent working of the universe, may have a greater capacity to move in harmony and support of the upward evolution of the self, away from chaos and darkness and separation and toward light and unity. This is a power that each positively oriented being has inside of themselves, which they can activate and call upon and harness in service to others. Indeed, in the rituals known to you as white magic, the self, ideally in concert with a group, may connect the microcosm to the macrocosm and open the gateway, allowing intelligent infinity to move downward and into the incarnate shell within the physical illusion, such that it may move through such a grounding rod, so to speak, outward as a prayer, as winged support to where it is needed, whether the planet as a whole, the consciousness of that known to you as Gaia, or those in a war-torn situation. You ask also regarding the balance in relationship between this inward act of service through the mechanism of prayer and the more visible outward act of service, and for entities within an illusion which has quite effectively obscured the time-space realm and the inner experience of each entity, such that the outer is most visible and quantifiable and measurable. It is understandable that such entities would weight service on the outer level as being of greater consequence. The entity who contributes money or with their own hands disperses humanitarian aid to those in need can be seen, whereas those working on the interior levels of time-space and inner planes are perceived to be less visible and of less consequence. Both modes of service can be powerfully impactful. Both involve action on the part of the self to one degree or another, a manifestation of intention that is born from that service-oriented heart, which we ask the seeker to examine at the beginning of our reply. One can be seemingly of outward service, checking off all the right boxes, moving through the right procedures and dances, but yet have a heart which is not fully investing the outward service with love and care for the other and desire to alleviate suffering, or any number of inner qualities which may block the heart and impede the upward flow of love. This is why we iterate often in relationship to the question of service. That is how that is often more important than the what. Why we describe that the washing of the dishes or the changing of the diaper can, with the light-filled present moment, open-hearted quality of consciousness, carry as much weight within the self and serve the world as effectively as one operating upon the world stage with many eyes upon it. We do not find that cultivating the intention to serve others within the self by engaging in acts of thoughts and prayers on a deep and intentional level necessarily precludes the self from additional service on the outer level. To the contrary, the more deeply the self commits their energy to genuine prayer, to invoking the Creator, to be, we correct this instrument, to ask, to be made a vessel, to lend one's full strength that one's light and the Creator's light may fly to those in need. Such a one is magnetizing themselves to respond to the call by gaining a greater sensitivity to the call of those around them. If such an entity is engaging in this act, they are putting their mind toward the suffering of others and thinking less of the needs of the lower self, seeking less of personal satisfaction or distraction, but instead embodying and living the path of service to others. And this path of service to others, this desire to serve, is not a discrete unit. It is not, shall we say, one-off, but is alive, is an awakening of an intelligence within the self that has its own life and journey of manifestation within the self, such that as the entity spends time in this interior room, intentionally practicing prayer in service to others, aligning the self to become a vehicle for service to others, this spark ignites more of the tinder of the personality on fire consuming more and more of the self in this fire, offering the self to this burning such that it does not stop at interior work alone, but of necessity manifest outward first and foremost, as fires are wont to do, by radiating metaphysical heat, spiritual light, and the polarizing conditions that aid others and encourage more of the same, more of the positive polarity of harmony and service and beauty and interconnectedness and the honoring of free will of all. And that outward manifestation, while happening most fundamentally on an energetic level or metaphysical level, then may open new opportunities for the self, such that they may add to or extend the inner work through outer work, because the entity is becoming one who desires to help others, who the more transparent the self becomes and purified in their nature that they become, desires more and more to help others fully, to give of the self completely, with less and less held back for the self, save for that which is necessary for its healthy functioning and well-being. As always, it begins with desire. What is your desire, my brother, my sister? Ask of yourself that question. Examine this desire. Analyze the many threads of desire within you. Purify them and trace them back. And inevitably, with consistent work in acceptance and forgiveness and seeking to understand the self will find upon the positive path the desire to serve others purely and to serve and seek the one creator in self and all others and always. At this time, we do transfer our contact to the one known as Jim. We are those known to you as the principle of Quo. I am Quo, and I am once again with this instrument. It has been a very productive evening, in our opinion. For the basic channeling process that has been enhanced through each instrument, we also feel that the quality of questions was most well thought out and offered in the desire to serve others. We thank you for all your efforts and for the questions from those who posed them. All of us proceed on our spiritual journeys through answering such questions for ourselves and with each other, moving together in rhythm in the dance of evolution. Asking and answering. This is the great dance, the great work. We commend you all for the great work that you have done this evening. At this time, we shall take our leave of this group and this instrument. We leave you all as we found you, in the love and in the light of the one infinite creator, Adonai, Vasu, Bodagas. So these channelings are incredibly detailed and subtle metaphysical discussions about an incredibly important and resonating topic with me. You see the soldiers in Ukraine fighting against Russians that are attacking them. And so it's easy to look at the aggressor and say, yeah, they're the bad guy. And it's easy to see those defending themselves saying that, you're the good guy. And it becomes like a sporting event sometimes. There's oftentimes been in our planet, in history, we've had situations like the Nazis, where there's clearly a bad guy. And then the question is, if you're involved in this fight, defending your people, your country against some sort of evil, ultimately you may end up polarizing yourself to the negative anyway. It's a really delicate and interesting question that they ask through the idea that at any time when you're being bellicose, and I found it really interesting in that first channeling, how they said they couldn't even understand. They couldn't understand being bellicose in any way. An inclination to fight or to quarrel is being bellicose. I know that may not be a word that you've used a lot, but it's just an idea that, hey, I'm going to fight the bad guys. That can turn you on the path of negative. So there's a really interesting discussion here. And the idea is that you open your heart, become aware of your reactions, the idea that you want revenge. Those are things that happen to all of us through this density. And it's an important understanding that in these battles and wars that happen on our planet, we can get caught up in them and we can have thoughts that arise. Oh, I want that guy to be taken down, or I want that group to be taken down, when everybody involved is the creator. So the key point is, if you come to a point where you see any group of people as less than yourself, then you have started to polarize negatively. They make a really good point by asking the question in the second channeling about a sort of seeming contradiction, that the forces of darkness and light are in a battle already in the fourth density. One of the most fascinating aspects of the law of one material is that there is a ongoing thought war. And if you read the raw material, and here we have the same answer, it's consistent. In the fourth density, there continues to be a battle between the forces of darkness, or what they refer to as the Orion Empire, and the forces of good. And there's an ongoing battle. And the idea is, if you just let the Orion Empire just take over and enslave everybody, then the free will of everyone involved would be a huge distortion. And the people in third density particularly would not be allowed to make the decisions that third density is designed to do. And that is to make the choice of being service to self or service to others. The system of the different densities would be distorted. So there is an attempt through a thought war. And remember, they're emphasizing it is a thought war. And so they're trying to stop Orion from enslaving planets so that the planet can polarize in the proper way. I don't think they can influence a planet to polarize negative or positive. So planets can polarize negative, and they become a social memory complex that's all about service to self. Or they can polarize to be service to others. Our planet is mixed with so many different species that have incarnated from different planets. It's a super crazy situation. And the illusion of third density is so complicated and mixed. It's an incredibly thick and difficult environment to maneuver through. So what's happening is we have wars all the time. We have conflicts all the time. And we are learning about ourselves. We reach a point where we see the Creator in others. We don't see ourselves as separate. We don't put ourselves above anyone else. And we stop enslaving each other, at least on our own mental level. And so there is a point where you can see the battles and the wars happening in the world, but you don't let it change your heart. When your heart's open, you realize, I still love my enemies. I still love those people that appear to be evil. I see the Creator in all. But on the next level, everyone knows about the Creator. On the next level, in the fourth density, the veil is lifted and there is still a battle. So in the next density, the Orion Empire, they're in the fourth density. The veil is lifted. They're fully aware of the one Creator, and they have chosen to continue to polarize service to self, closing the heart. The heart is closed for the negative entity, and they go about only seeking to serve themselves. So it's hard to think of as a group. The Orion Empire is a group, but it's a group of individuals that are all battling with each other, trying to enslave others and dominate and manipulate others. So a lot of times I see conspiracy stories or people that are caught up in rabbit holes of misinformation where they say, oh, this Galactic Federation is in this battle and they're doing all these things. And you can tell that if they're truly aligned with the law of one, they're not doing that particular thing. There are limits to what they can do. There are things that they can do. And in general, I think the thought battle is just to keep the environment safe, to keep the environment so that it's not completely a negative situation where everyone's enslaved. I would say that ultimately they may have failed. The Orion Empire has created a situation, at least from what I understand, where we really don't have a lot of free will and we're being manipulated all the time by social media and other networks. And believe me, it's a lot more subtle. And whatever side that you're on, you're being manipulated. I don't care what side you're on, you're being manipulated all the time. You have a view of the world that is completely distorted, and it distorts our decision of choosing service to others or service to self. In some ways, maybe that's the best they can do. They can't create violence. I have people that say, oh yeah, the Galactic Federation, they're going to totally battle back and stop Russia or whatever. And that's not true. We have to fight our battles with ourselves. They just got to stop Orion from tipping the scales so that it's completely unfair. A lot of what you see is people talking about this ongoing battle of light and darkness. And from what I get in this channeling is that we do not understand it. It is very difficult to understand. The interesting aspect is in the fifth and sixth densities, there is no war. The entities that move into fifth and sixth density, and there are entities in Orion's side that are in fifth and sixth density. Once you reach there, you're not really going to be participating in the battle because you have an even wider view. Which tells me, once you move into the 5th and 6th densities, the matrix completely changes, the simulation changes, and our understanding of war and battles just goes beyond what we can understand now. It's interesting that only 4th density continues to have a battle, and it's only a thought battle. I've actually contemplated writing a fictional story within this realm. It fascinates me. I believe that there's these amazing thought battles that are happening with entities trying to protect our planet and also trying to subjugate our planet at the same time. And I bet someday we could understand it, if maybe a battle like the Jedi and Sith, but on a much more complicated scale. I really love the last part of this channeling, where they're asking a question I ask all the time and I get asked all the time. I want to be of service, yet the idea of how I can be best of service can be hard. It's been hard since we oftentimes are stuck in our own homes and houses. We can be of service if we utilize our meditations to send a light to people in the proper way. Simply sending thoughts and prayers is not enough. Simply sending thoughts and prayers is not really making a difference. It's going beyond that. It's channeling the light of the Creator into a situation, bringing that intelligent energy of the Creator to heal and to radically transform situations. It becomes an amazing service. And when done in groups, it's even more powerful. So you can be of service if you're doing it with intensity and doing it properly. If you're simply reciting a 1-second prayer, that's not really being of service. But I think you can do it just a little bit more and really offer a service. And they equivocate offering service internally as well as offering service to others. One of the reasons I believe that Neville Goddard had his birth from above and transformed in his earlier life, he spent a lot of time imagining for other people. People would come to him and he would imagine for them. All day long, all the time, they would come to him and he would sit imagining with people all the time. And if you can do this on the right level, with the right intensity, using your imagination in the right way, you can be of great service to people all the time. But there is a distinction between just thoughts and prayers and using your imagination in an intense and concentrated fashion. I would love to get your impressions of the distinction between service as an action-oriented thing and as an internal service. I'd like to get your impressions of the idea that all bellicosity is bad, yet there's battles that are happening in 4th density. The paradox is where oftentimes we learn the most about metaphysics. As Quo often says, I would love to get your comments and I'll be checking them out, because some of this I'm still thinking about and learning about, and it's just really cool that Quo addressed these things, especially considering what's happening in the world. You can find all episodes of The Reality Revolution at therealityrevolution.com, and welcome to The Reality Revolution.